Once a week, I look at that pile of comics that you have submitted in the Discord, link down below if you also want to join in on the pile of comics. But once a week, I do that, and that time of week has come. And I want to talk about the beginnings of y'all's comics, because I've been thinking a lot about the beginnings of my own comics, and now I want to look at what you guys have been doing. And so I read a bunch of your comics, and I narrowed it down to 2 comics that I would like to talk about, because the main thing that I noticed that y'all were struggling with was exposition at the beginnings of your comics. Now, I'm not against exposition at the beginning of a comic. Obviously, as mentioned in my video where I dug through my own comics, one of my absolute favorite openings that I have done is purely exposition. It is The Scourge of Nine Point. And what I liked about its exposition was that it was layered, right? There was a lot of showing that was occurring alongside the telling. And the other aspect of it is that I like that there was action, even if it wasn't current action. Everything was fit within a scene. So when I was looking at a lot of y'all's stories, I found that the exposition was kind of weighing things down rather than pulling things forward. So the first comic I want to talk about is Belonging by Canine Confetti. And this was kind of like the one that stood out to me the most because it does such an excellent job at showing its world and its characters, where it was very strange to go back to the very first 3 pages, where there is this dense amount of information that is given to the reader. And I read through all of it. I was good. I read through all of it. And aside from the nitty-gritty details, aside from the exact years that people started becoming mutants. Maybe I should explain the story, but it explains that children after a certain year in the world started being born with mutations, and now we are in a world in the future, this has been happening for a while. Now there are people with superhuman abilities or animalistic alien features, and there is tensions between the non-mutant mundane people and the mutants. And I think that this opening is okay with some of its details that it adds, but most of these end up being shown. And I find that this opening just serves to bog down the story and bury the hook, where we could get the basic information of this and then move into the actual story, where the characters very well show the world that they live in. I think it's very easy to grasp what's going on without this large amount of text. And this was kind of similar to a lot of your stories that I found, where we did not need all of this text, and it just serves to kind of slow things down, right? Another example of it comes in the 3rd page. There's a lot of detail that goes into the paragraphs explaining the world, and then we go into the introductory caption of the character Naomi. And I have mixed feelings on bio lines that happen in comics. I think they can be used well. I think of Scott Pilgrim as being an example where they're used well. And I think that it is used well in the case of the other character in the story who gets introduced on page 6, which is AP Chief. I think that the reason that this one hits better is because it adds information to the story that isn't immediately obvious, saying that she's the reason for the fight. I think that's cool and interesting and unique because it creates kind of a juxtaposition between this very nice, sweet looking character and juxtaposing it with her being like the start of a fight, you know, like it's her fault for a fight. Like, I think that's an interesting juxtaposition, and that's what captions and things can bring into your story. Whereas if you're using captions to relay information that will be shown to the reader, doesn't need to be shown to the reader immediately, something that can unfold, it just becomes redundant and kind of bogs things down. And especially in the beginning of your comic, when you're trying to hook people, it's better to kind of pull off of these like crutches, I guess, because this is like an excellent comic, and I recommend that you do check it out and read it. So please do, because it does pop off, and the characters very much speak for themselves. I think it would have been stronger to lead with the scene as is, rather than bogging things down with information that could be delivered in a much more showing way. So the next comic I wanted to talk about was Sailing Souls by Cinti, and this is a very pretty comic. Now, this comic at its face doesn't appear like it is expositing, because it doesn't have like the captions, right? I didn't want to just do like, oh, don't use captions, because captions can be useful if you're overlaying meanings and such. But another way that you can exposit too much is to use dialogue. And this comic opens with a character telling the main character, I believe, a whole bunch of exposition. And I don't even think in this case that this particular line of exposition is all that bad. The main issue that I have with the opening of this comic is that it starts with such a integral scene for the character. So the character is attempting a rite for the third time, and they're very hopeful that it is going to happen, but then it ends in failure. And I think that is like an excellent arc of a scene to work with. And it has a very powerful final page where it's like, I'm sorry, but the spirit has found you not worthy. Like, I think that's very impactful and a very nice place to end up with the story. However, there is so much to be shown in this scene that isn't being shown. And I would have liked to see things given the chance to breathe. Before we reach the line that is announcing the character and detailing what is happening, I would like to have entered the scene with the character, you know? I would like to see more establishing going on. For one, the second panel is like a placing of something, and I do not know what is being placed here, because the scene just didn't have time to emerge. It didn't have time to be built up. We are just kind of plopped into a space, and we are overwhelmed with some dialogue exposition, and we're kind of lost in the environment. And this is a case just where, like, I think that showing and letting the scene breathe would have done so much more for it, especially when you're bringing in this character who is tense and nervous, and there's like a quietness to nervousness. There's the silence of anticipation, right? And giving the space to really like explore this character's emotions could have really punched up the scene and given it a lot more weight. Even another way that I thought about was like this dialogue. If they had broken it up and pulled it apart throughout the scene to give it more weight throughout it, and just allow it to be expanded upon as we understand like the blocking of the scene, like things could have gone a lot better for it. I think it's just a few missing pages almost is kind of the issue, and then like a front loading of the exposition, because unlike with my previous issue with belonging, I think there are nice layers that are occurring here. You know, like if we layered the scene that is occurring while explaining the things in the scene that like can't just be inferred. Like I think that would go well, you know, like having the narrative of the main character attempting this rite again while also explaining the rite wouldn't have felt overloaded if it was just properly paced through it. Anyways, I hope those ideas are kind of helpful for any of you who are trying to work on your own comics. If you have interest in me looking at any of your comics or Ursula looking at any of your comics, you can leave them on the Discord. We will check them out. We slowly go through them. We try to pick ones that fit the theme that we're going for. I appreciate you guys very much for letting us read your comics and judge them. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one, and best of luck writing the beginnings of your comics.